On this week's episode, we review a webinar that Andrew did with Kickstarter themselves. We cover the questions that weren't answered in his webinar. We also link in the show notes to the full webinar that we discuss, that we mentioned many times in this episode. Make sure to check that out. Let's jump into it.
Before this episode rolls, I wanted to let you guys know about the Crowdfunding Nerds Academy. This is a brand new series of courses where you can learn how to build, excite, and prepare a crowd to fund you on launch day. It has been endorsed by industry veterans. We have tons of experience behind us, and we've helped creators at this point raise well over $30 million through crowdfunding and over $100 million in e-commerce sales. So if there's anybody that knows how to teach you to do this yourself, if that's your plan, it is us. You know, we spare no detail. We are very, very concentrated and purposeful in what it is that we share. So we're not going to be sharing any information that you don't need to know. Everything is essential information that you need to know in the order that you should know it. So we cover there are 3 different areas that we cover. First one is Facebook ads for Kickstarter. If you want to build an effective pre-launch following with a Facebook ad campaign that gets you funded on day one, that is the course for you. If you're looking to design a crowdfunding page that converts, this is the course for you. You know, you'll learn all sorts of things about how to effectively demonstrate your product, create a compelling offer that wins backers and things like that. And then our final course is email marketing for Kickstarter and crowdfunding. So you need a crowd in order to fund your project, and email is still the number one way to communicate with your customers, even in 2025. So in the course, you're going to learn all sorts of things about what your fans want to read, how to write to your fans, how to get 50% plus open rates, and how to reduce unsubscribers, how to actually convert your email list into backers. Between 10 and 30% of your email list should become your backers, and more. So we have 3 courses, one fantastic bundled price. You can get any one course for $399, which is, normal price for a course is $700. So save 43% just buying one course. You can get 2 courses bundled for $599, or you can get all 3 courses bundled together for $699. This deal is good all the way through March 31st, and then it's going away. So come join us for the Crowdfunding Nerds Academy. You also get us, by the way. So if you have questions, burning questions, while you're actually absorbing this information, you can ask it, and we will respond in comments and things like that. So help your crowdfunding project reach its fullest potential. You can get up to 67% off and lifetime access to updates and things like that. This is your only chance to lock it in. Make sure to join us by March 31st at crowdfundingnerds.com/academy. Again, crowdfundingnerds.com/academy. Let's get back to the episode.
Game begin.
Let's go.
Bring your pretty face to my ad.
Amazing.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another awesome episode of the Crowdfunding Nerds podcast. I shocked you, Sean. I saw your eyes bugged out a little bit. Did I?
We're talking about bright lights before we hit recording, so I was just getting flashbacks.
So anyway, this podcast is a really great podcast you should keep listening to. What are we talking about today, Sean? I talked with Kickstarter, right?
You're famous now.
I'm famous.
Famous. Kickstarter invited you to speak on a webinar that was pretty well attended, and I think it went pretty well. So we're here to kind of give people the outline, and we're also going to include a link in the show notes for people to see the full thing. We recommend anyone just go listen to the actual webinar. Maybe do you want to talk about how did that come about?
Yeah. So it turns out that the head of games for Kickstarter, Asher McClanahan, is actually a longtime listener of our podcast. And even before he was hired, he was actually a Kickstarter creator. He raised close to $1 million for 3 different projects. And he, is a big time tabletop RPG player and everything too. And so he actually coordinated through Kickstarter's team to they invited me onto a webinar, which they're doing to kind of try to expand or just help their creators with marketing in particular. And so that's why they reached out to me to talk about, campaign setup and pricing, marketing and community building, and then, how to kind of leverage some of the Kickstarter features and tools for their creators. But really what it turned into was it was so much I don't want to say marketing 101, but it was like the most essential lessons from like a theoretical perspective. Like, you need to have an email list, is, and how to build an email list when you have no money, and how to, what the most effective way you can, if you have $1,000 or $300, like how you can use that most effectively for your Kickstarter campaign. And so it had a very hyper focus into like newer creators. And so it was great. And then we answered a bunch of audience questions as well. And I was able to actually share, the first podcast we ever did was related to Kickstarter's referral metrics and trying to diagnose what those referral metrics are. And we can include a link to that one in the show notes too. It was the first episode ever, I think. And we figured out, like, if I bring 6 backers, Kickstarter is going to bring like 4 more. And since then, we kind of did an update. It's like, if I bring 7 backers, Kickstarter will bring like 2 to 3 more. So it's but it's like, that's like a massive percentage. In fact, I look at about 30%. If you bring 70% of the audience, Kickstarter adds 30% or brings 30% more. So that was a really cool thing to finally talk about. And actually, everybody on the call from Kickstarter, they that was news to them. Like, they didn't, because Kickstarter's referral metrics, they don't really share the full picture. They try to help you, but I mentioned, for example, what drives someone's interest in your Kickstarter campaign is different than what captures the result of that, interest that you built in the person. So whereas, I guess I'll explain real quick, is like, if I get like Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. to do a review of our of Deliverance, then that gets people to see Deliverance, that makes them excited, and then they will go maybe in Kickstarter's app and search for Deliverance, expansion or whatever, and then they back the game. What Kickstarter will do is it will credit that purchase to Kickstarter's search algorithm or search on the app, and Kickstarter gives credit to itself for searches, because you're using their app, you're using their tools, and that's the only we'll say that's the way they found and backed your project. But in actuality, you are fully, for in this example, I myself would be responsible for generating that person interested in searching and then backing the project through the driver, which was a reviewer covering my game, which I had set up. That's work that I did, basically. And so, we did this thing where it was like, certain bits of content are completely credited to you and your efforts, like any custom links that you put together, any like external sources are typically credited to you. And then a lot of I don't want to say a lot, but I'd say about a third of the things that Kickstarter credits to itself are actually they are captured through Kickstarter's systems, but the driver of interest was, as a result of your effort too. And so I was able to share this metrics with the Kickstarter team, which they were actually really excited to learn, because that's not something that you can really learn even from Kickstarter's side. Like, you can see how many people, they can see like how many emails and whatnot, but they can't see how many people did you gather from pre-marketing before launch, and how many of those people actually converted, and where does the conversion come from, and all of that. You have to have both my, not only the backer list, but you have to have the list for the pre-marketing list that you build, and all of that too, to get all of that data. But and for I'm going to say half dozen projects we did like a deep dive into, maybe more, and maybe in fact maybe we did a half dozen each time. I know we went back and looked at that subject again, and so maybe it's like 12 different campaigns that we gathered data for, and on along these lines to kind of come up with that, 77 backers. If I earn 7 backers, Kickstarter is going to add 3 more. And that was probably one of the coolest things for them, and it was cool for me to see that they really loved hearing that, and how it kind of made sense, because they have a lot of anecdotal experience. Asher, like I said, was a creator himself before he became the head of games, And so it was a good conversation to have there. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, something we probably should revisit and do it again, because it has been a while since we've actually done that sort of data analysis. We
Yeah.
could probably do with an updated version of it. So this was before a live audience. There were people there asking their real questions. And I know that Kickstarter had outlined some kind of preliminary questions for you to answer. Maybe what we should do in this podcast, we should cover some of the questions you didn't get a chance to answer. So maybe some questions that are in this list that you
Yep.
didn't get a chance to answer, we can start there. And then if people want to see the questions you did answer, they can check out the actual webinar. It's on YouTube right now. So there's a link in the show notes if people want to go check that out. It's on Kickstarter's YouTube channel, so you'll be able to find it there as well.
That's awesome. And there's even some of the questions that I got to answer. There was such limited time on that webinar, and it's like, I know I even said this several times. I know I'm not going to be able to get into depth, but here's the end from the beginning. This is the thing you need to know. And then I would try to explain as much as I possibly could, and then before moving on. But I'm really curious. One question they asked me that I would really like to ask you and get your feedback on was, what are some trends in successful campaigns that you've seen?
Trends in advertising.
Well, just like
Or just the
when a
projects
campaign
themselves.
is successful, what do you see that's like a commonality between all the campaigns that are successful that you just would identify?
I think there's a level of professionalism that they all would have in common, and this is in a sense that they take themselves seriously. This is not a hobby. This is clearly a business that people have invested capital into making sure the presentation is slick and professional. So that I think that just goes without saying. That is certainly the trend that is now on Kickstarter. I think another thing is pledges being very simple to understand. I think that's another thing that I see is that when we have a whole course on your Kickstarter page optimization and the offer design, but really it comes down to having those kind of three basic pledges: your very kind of basic pledge, your deluxe pledge, and your all-in pledge. And really, the basic pledge is only there to sort of push people towards the deluxe pledge, and then the all-in pledge is just all the frills and shiny things. So I think that's very clear that's very important to have a very simple, very clear pricing structures, very clear page layout, and a lot of the things is just the kind of the fundamentals, the foundations of communication. Like, just be clear. Yep. I think there's a tendency where people want to be very complicated and convoluted and flashy. There's actually, it's more important, I think, that your Kickstarter page itself is very clear. In fact, we've just run some sale campaigns, e-commerce for some of our clients, and the ad imagery and messaging that has done the best recently for these kind of tabletop e-commerce sales has just been a big picture that says sale. So there's nothing kind of flashy or special or sexy about that messaging, but it's very powerful in communicating what is happening. And I think that's something you have to tap into on your Kickstarter page and in your advertising as well. Is just don't try to be too flashy or intelligent or quirky. Start with the most obvious and the most painstakingly obvious, which is just to simply say what the thing is, and then that should then draw people in.
Yeah. It's interesting because board games or tabletop, and that's kind of what the focus of this Kickstarter interview was an emphasis on tabletop campaigns in particular. Tabletop games have this inherent advantage over lots and lots of other products in that they are just immediately awesome. They're really, really cool and really interesting on their own. And I think that people think they need to spice things up a little bit more. It's like, dude, you're already a pirate flying a spaceship, killing zombies across, worlds. And how cool is that? Like, how cool is that already? Or whatever your theme is, if it's almost no matter what it is, it's just interesting. And to just explain to people what it is, I think is this, people think, oh, it can't be that simple. And a lot of the time it just really is. You get people interested by clearly explaining what it is. Sometimes that means they don't like what it is and move on. Other people really like what it is and jump in. But what you never have, if you're very, very clear, is you never have people that don't understand what it is. And that's really what you're trying to eliminate. You're not trying to convince people that don't normally like these types of games to jump in. You should be, because there are a lot of people that do like these types of games, and so you should focus on them. Like a plumber. If I'm a plumber and I'm going knocking door to door, asking if somebody has a leaky faucet, and then somebody says no, it's like, well, what if I just tested your faucets anyway for a leak? It's just, doors are going to get slammed in your face. The police are going to get called, all sorts of stuff is going to happen. You're going to have a really hard time convincing somebody to let them in your house so you can test to see if their faucets that they think are fine are leaky. So just focus on the people that know they have a problem. Focus on the people that the toilet won't flush. Focus on the people that have an urgent need, right? And obviously you're not going to really be able to do that door to door as a plumber. But the idea is, when you apply that to tabletop, is there are people that really love your theme or that really love the mechanics of the game, and just try to make sure that it's completely clear what your product is so that they will know, yes, this is something that I do like. Confused people don't buy anything. And so if you're like, this is the greatest game with the most innovative mechanics and a revolutionary this and that, and it's infinite replayability, it's like, well, I don't know what you just described at all, And so I'm just, confused people don't buy. Confused people don't really inquire further, So they're like, oh, cool, hey, that's great. And then they're off doing something else that they understand. So,
I know one thing that you did with the webinar, you spent a great deal of time on this particular topic, was the idea of gathering your email list before spending money on ads to really make sure that there is a natural or organic demand for the product. I think that's very important. The tendency for people to kind of jump the gun as they get very excited about an idea, but that idea might already exist in the marketplace, and there might be a better iteration of it.
Yeah.
And maybe you need to tweak it somehow. So that's very important. And one thing you also spoke about is designing your game with stretch goals in mind in terms of expansions. So that way, if you do want to add an expansion as a stretch goal, well, it's all being play tested and it's ready to go. You've kind of designed it from the ground up. And you can kind of backwards engineer it into a stretch goal. So I think a lot of people found that tip particularly helpful. But I think that again, it comes down to this idea of not jumping the gun, taking things slowly, being diligent, and to make sure that your idea can exist, because not everything's a business. Not everything's going to be business worthy, but it could very well be an exciting project just to do as a hobby, and that's perfectly fine. It really comes down to your goals, and do you want to just have something exist in the world and you're happy with that? Or are you trying to create a publishing business and you want this to be a series and a title, and you want to do this as a full-time job? You can have a very different approach and sort of spend philosophy, keeping those things in mind.
Yeah. And another thing is, a lot of the time, especially when you're on your first project, or maybe it's your first, we'll call it, so like I always think of Adam's Apple Games, Adam Ryberg with Planet Unknown. The way it was, I want to say his third Kickstarter launch, or maybe it was his fourth, but it was the one that he knew was like the magnum opus, the pinnacle of his design skill and whatnot. It was the game that he knew that was this. If any game is going to succeed and be an evergreen product that fuels my company, it's going to be this one. And that particular game, if you're working on that game, there are games that are like, this one's a filler game and I want to get, cut my teeth on Kickstarter and whatnot. And then there's the game that you're like for me, Deliverance was that, where it's like, this is the best product I'm sure that I'll ever make. Even though it's the first product, I want to do my very best with this one. I think that I kind of detailed out a little bit about how I went through and painstakingly was like, I'm not going to spend anything on advertising. This product needs to show me that it deserves to exist. And the only way that I'm going to be able to figure that out is if I can build an email list of excited people without spending money on ads. So how am I going to do that? It's like, I'm a marketer, but I really am just like everyone else, where it's like, I don't even know where to begin, and let me try something and see if it works and whatever. My goal was very simple: one email on my list per week. And if I could get another one in my Facebook group, it'd be like, well, that's two. If it's the same person that joined both, well, that's still two. And eventually it became one per day. And then, kind of moved from there. And it took me just, I want to say like 12 months to get to 1,100 people on my email list, and then 900 in my Facebook group. And I even did a podcast back in like 2020 or 2019. I think it was either December 2020 or December 2019 on the Board Game Design Lab podcast about what I was doing at that moment that eventually led me to acquiring those, those followers. Like as I was in process of doing it. So we can link that in the show notes as well for people. But yeah, so the idea is that what I learned when I was developing my game, my magnum opus product, the evergreen product I knew was going to be good if I just got it right, was that I didn't really understand how to talk about it at first. I knew what I liked about it, but I needed to figure out what other people that liked it, like what stood out to the game or out to them about the game. And that going through that organically was so helpful. Going to local conventions, going to my local board game shop, going to, talking about it online and asking every single playtester what, very, very specific questions about like, well, what would what if you gave this rating, whatever you rated the game in your head, what would increase the rating by 1 point? That's one of the most valuable questions that I asked to people. Like, what did you like most about the game, about your experience? And some of the things that people liked most really surprised me. And eventually it became something where it's like, oh, I now know how to talk about this in a way that appeals to the right people, because a bunch of people told me that the talent system was amazing and the way you could customize was amazing, and you could play this game a dozen times and with the same character and have a different experience every time. And I knew that was something that I should highlight and focus on somehow, and other things like that. So it was like I really learned so much about my own product just by doing that organically. And I think that people that skip that and just get ads, you get 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 emails on your list, and you don't quite know how to talk about it. You're not going to get those people that would be raving fans to be raving fans if you just can't explain it clearly in a way that appeals to them. So so anyway, very very, very important point. And it's hard to, you can't really rush, I mean, for me, Deliverance took 5 years before it hit Kickstarter, and that's a very long time. I mean, I want to say Twilight Imperium took 10 years to design or whatever, and originally, but a few other games, I want to say Ascendancy was a long one that that Matthew, one of our clients, worked on. And but overall, like 5 years is a really long time. And the problem that I found was that I could have released Deliverance. I could have launched Deliverance on Kickstarter after like 2.5 years, but it wouldn't have been the best version of itself. And I had to learn and like uncover what was kind of getting in the way of the player's experience, the player's fun, and what types of things would really enhance and give the players everything they wanted, and without any compromise on the quality. And it's like that. It was just turned out to be a really long journey with my product, but I wouldn't.
But you also have a vision, right? It's not just about this board game; it's about expansions and other games that are in the same universe. And this is something that we've actually been talking about: is merchandising, and can we create Deliverance T-shirts and posters and mouse pads, so that when they go to your store and they're buying the game, they'll pick up the other trinket, that because they love the world, they love the setting. So that's something that you went in very much with that intention, that goal to create this kind of bigger brand. And that's not going to be everyone's goal and intention. So we'll have different approaches. So that's something to keep in mind. And I think another thing to keep in mind as well is that not everything has to be monetized. I think in our society, we've lost the idea of sacred, and I think there's something almost sacred about being at your home with your family and having a fun with a game. And I feel like now with our social media age, where everything can be monetized, where you could literally whip out your phone, take a picture of you playing a game with your family, and then you could use that to like advertise something like that. I think that's going to be very dangerous, because there's an element where I think the board game hobby space, there's something that's particularly wholesome, just about playing and enjoying games and not monetizing it. And there might be people who just want to play games, create a Kickstarter for the thing to exist, and then as part of their enjoyment of the hobby, rather than it being a business that they want to create this international corporation or whatever. So I think that's something to keep in mind as well, that it's perfectly fine to create a game that might not thrive in like the international market, but it might be a very good game that satisfies your family or satisfies a handful of people, and that's all you need, because it's something that you're passionate about and that you enjoy making. So there's that all these things are going to change how you approach this.
Yeah. I think that a lot of the time when I hear that particular advice, like as a creator, my brain kind of turns off. It's like, well, I have this drive that's like, I can't let that in my head. I'm like doing this thing. I've already decided, and there are a lot of people listening to this that might feel the same way. And you're not the people we're talking to, really. The people that we're talking to with advice like that are the people that are like, I played this one game and I'm going to I'm just going to retheme Monopoly to pirates.
Or they've created a game and they've been trying to do organic marketing and they can't get 1,000 emails. They're failing horribly, and it's like, okay, well, it's clear that there isn't a market for this, and my initial assumptions are wrong. So that is a possibility of doing what we're about to suggest as well, is that you might actually fail, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. That just means that you can enjoy what you've created in a different way.
Yeah, well, I think some of the absolute best thing that can happen to creators is to fail. I think that that's a weird way to say it, but it really is. I mean, the worst thing that could happen to some people is to make $100,000 or more on a crowdfunding campaign, because they're not going to be able to deliver it, or they're going to lose their shirt, and they're not going to be able to afford what it is that they're doing. And I think that it's something that there are a lot of people that really miss, like the business lessons of, you have a consumer that you need to please, and your people, if you're going to bring them along with you on this process, you need to recognize that they have needs, and one of the needs that they have is that you thoroughly play test your game and you make a rule book that's good, which we had a podcast come out really recently exactly about the rule book. But it's like, it's such a disappointment when creators put a half-hearted effort into something and refuse to believe that their product isn't the best thing since sliced bread. You need to have a dose of humility, and the only thing sometimes that can give humility to people is failure.
It's a failure.
Failure.
Horrible failure. Yes, we do get some clients and or some people who ask us for our services, and we try gently decline their offer just because we know that they're not ready for Kickstarter, and they refuse to listen. They launch anyway, and they get the sort of expected result that we would suggesting, which is never particularly exciting, but you hope that people learn from that and can move on. So with all this being said, what were some of the questions that were not answered in the kind of sheet of questions that Kickstarter sent over to you?
Yeah, let's see. So what lessons did this is an interesting one that I didn't really get much time to answer. So they asked me, so I've run 2 campaigns of my own, funding over $2 million, which is about 828,000 of that is on Kickstarter. What key lessons did you learn from those campaigns that you now apply to your business? And I think the only thing that I really talked about was how, making an expansion standalone is really smart, and how I really wish that it was a real much larger gamble than I realized, to make an expansion require the base game in order to play, because all of my fans, I have hardcore fans that are going to just buy that thing no matter what. But then to get new people in, it's like, dude, you're asking people to spend $150, and so, but the thing that we actually talked about this in our staff meeting was that how valuable the upsell is. When I made about 5,000 units of Deliverance, and then I made about 2,500 units of the various add-ons. And I kind of miscalculated when I was printing. When I told them how much to print, I kind of miscalculated. I told them basically to make 2,000 of each add-on, and I realized that I was going to actually be short a number of metal coins, and because there are people that added metal, a lot of people added stuff like that to their pledges, and it's like, dude, I have 2,100 metal coins that I need to give, and I only ordered 2,000, so I better quickly connect with them and say, hey, can you make me 2,500 of those? And which they did, but I had to pay through I had to pay more. I didn't get the benefit of economies of scale there because I told them late. And so when we got all of our add-ons, I had, about, let's say, 3,000 Deliverance games that were claimed and sold and whatnot, and about 2,000 left that I had to sell, just e-commerce wise. And we only had like 200 to 400 of each of the add-ons left, and we sold those things so fast. and they were all out of stock, like within a month to 3 months at the most. And we went through, I want to say it came out in like October, and so it was like the Christmas holiday shopping season. We were like right in time for that, and the biggest the biggest combination of products that sold on our website were products that had bundle deals. So I had the base game bundled with a neoprene playmat, which is actually the least popular add-on that we had on Kickstarter, but because they were bundled together, it was the most popular product that I sold on our website. And it was so common to upsell. Instead of a $99 game, I was able to sell a $99 game and a $49 playmat reduced, combined and reduced by $10 because you bundled them together. And those sold quick. It was amazing to see. And then our metal coins, and if ever anybody would buy a game via e-commerce, about 50% of them would add metal coins. And so metal coins were gone almost immediately. And it was like, holy cow, I should have made way more add-ons. I didn't realize how valuable, because I was thinking, I'd rather sell out of all my add-ons and have no stock left than have a bunch of add-ons left over that, have no game to pair them with. And so I undervalued, like what I would have done is I would have put at least 500 more than I ordered. If I sold 3,000 games, let's say if I sold like 2,100 of various add-ons, I would have had 900 more. I feel like a 40% upsell rate for add-ons is pretty common. And it's something that I wish I had. I would have made much more money with the same amount of effort, really. So that's like the big thing there. Then the common mistakes, I really wanted to go into hygiene factors. So they asked me, what are some common mistakes creators make when crafting their Kickstarter campaign page and how can they avoid them?
Let's just focus on because I think the most important thing here is the 3-scroll test. I think that's if you can just get that, then it all kind of follows from there. So maybe we could just focus on that, because I don't want to get too lost in the weeds, because we could probably do a whole podcast on this topic. So maybe just talk about
we have.
Yeah, we have in the past. So maybe just talk about maybe the 3-scroll, the 1-scroll test, and then we can move on to the next question, because I think that would be enough to kind of hit this on the head.
Sure. Yeah. So the 1-scroll test is kind of a play off of an original podcast we did with Jeremy Howard of Man vs. Meeple and Rawstone Games Now. He said that he will give 3 scrolls, and if he doesn't understand what it is and what you're offering and generally why the game is awesome, he's done. So for us, the 1-scroll test is I need to know what this is and if I would generally like it or not in 1 scroll. And we're talking like a mobile scroll. We're not talking like 1 screen length. We're talking 1 scroll length. So like on desktop, it would be, you've got your above the fold, and you've got 1 scroll, which is like 1 desktop size screen length below. But mobile, you might have like, 2 or 3, swipes before you're done, right? And so I need to know the hook of the game. For me, I tell everybody in 6 words or less why this game is awesome and why you don't have anything like it on your shelf. So tell me what it is in the most attractive way that hooks me. That's 1 scroll. Then in 3 scrolls, I need to be able to see like the game laid out and generally kind of how it plays and like the experience that I'm going to have with the game, and generally kind of like the cost of the the pledge tier, is and that's like on the right in your you can have a bunch of things going on a desktop, but like in mobile, I need to generally have an idea of what this is and what I'm in for, and if I would like it or not. And if you didn't do a good job there, you've lost me.
So when it comes to pricing and pledge structures, what strategies have you found to be the most effective in driving backer engagement and increasing funding?
Yes. And actually I will expand on something that you said earlier about pledge tiers, about the pledge levels being clear. So you already mentioned, like, you've got your base pledge, which is just the minimum entry point. Then you've got your deluxe pledge, which is like all the fancy gameplay content and the better bits. And then the all in, which is all like, all the premium cosmetic upgrades like neoprene mat, metal coins, all that. Well, I think that system is really, really important during the mid campaign when you're in a slump. So when you have less visibility on Kickstarter or GameFound or whatever, you've got to hustle. One of the biggest things, if like the rationale for why each of those pledge levels exist is very clear, like the low pledge is the minimum entry price. So if somebody's looking to spend as little money as possible to experience the thing, that's for them. Then the deluxe and all gameplay content for me is what the next pledge tier that makes the most sense is. And then the all in, all of those things make complete sense. Your mid campaign strategy can be all about getting your existing backers to upgrade to the next level. So all of your base game backers, you need to give them reasons why the deluxe edition is worth the extra $20 or $30 or $10, whatever. And if you do a really good job giving them reasons as to why it's worth it to upgrade, they'll do that right in the middle of the campaign. And it's $30 more that you made that you wouldn't have, right in the middle of the campaign. And you didn't need to get a new backer, and you were able to you were able to generate funding anyway. I think that is one of the most underrated strategies for this, is like working on people to convince them to upgrade from your base game to deluxe. What is so compelling about the deluxe edition that the base game players really will find value? And then for the deluxe people, what's so compelling about, like, why the neoprene mat, why the metal coins, why the acrylic standees, why the minis or whatever? And the better an argument you can give, the stronger your sales, your mid campaign is going to be. So that's secret strategy.
The one thing I see here is that they have information about the about the creator section. They seem to suggest that this information should be filled out, and you should kind of take some time to sort of optimize your profile page. Did they mention anything about that to you in terms of that impacting maybe the project we love or anything like that?
No. So there was this audience submitted question that was like, how do you get the project we love badge? And my simple answer is ask for it. Make your campaign really, really awesome, and then let Kickstarter know that you are doing that. So like email support@kickstarter.com or email somebody and just say, hey, and ask for it. Would you review our page and blah, blah. Right. But I think that people they don't really like to buy from corporations. They like to buy from people that they can relate to. And so, like, one of the most underrated pages on a website is about us, or about the company, or about the creator, or whatever. Our what do they call it? I can't remember the name now. It starts with the P and I forget. But
Profile?
yeah, well, it'll come to me. It just like it hit me like a ton of bricks, and I'll scream it out. But the most important thing is that people understand like who you are, and part of especially as a newer creator, one of the real advantages you have is that you're just a humble person trying to make something amazing, and you're not one of these big corporations that have, in theory, millions of dollars to be able to do whatever you want to do. And like, you really need support. And the more people can understand that, like, who you are, and that you're a real person, that they'll say this person deserves my respect and deserves my support. And so I think that is super underrated. And so Kickstarter, we didn't get to this, but in ensuring the new Kickstarter creator tab is fully filled out, I highly recommend doing that. I am all about that. You definitely want people to know who you are. And in a way, some people will say, I don't want people to know who I am. You kind of, I call it the noble sacrifice. You need to, as the face of your company, you need to be vulnerable so that people can know a little bit more about you. You don't get so much a private life as someone, just a normal person. Like, you've chosen to step up and become this creator that's trying to do something. And in order to do that, you need to get people behind you that believe in you. And how can they do that if they don't know you?
I think another thing as well when it comes to crowdfunding is that you're putting your reputation on the line. If you stand up and you're putting your name out there and, hey, this is who I am, and if you swindle people, well, then guess what? Your name's going to be tarnished. So there's almost this kind of ability to build trust with people. Like, hey, I'm going to do this, and the reason is because I'm telling you who I am. Here's my identity. I'm this person. This is my name. and I'm not going to swindle you because, well, my reputation and my livelihood now is tied into me delivering this product. So I think that's another reason it helps build trust. If you're anonymous, then people, how can they trust you? You could just swindle people and then no one will know. So when it comes to business, you kind of have to have this transparency, and I think it's very important for crowdfunding and for Kickstarter in particular.
That's right.
Right. Yeah. So one thing they asked was about how big your email list should be before you launch, and what is the sort of general idea of conversion rates and the cost per subscribers and those type of benchmarks. So you want to tackle that quickly?
Yeah, sure. So I threw out some numbers on that show about, or on the webinar about this, but we have internal metrics that are our goals. How big should a creator's email list be before launching? So let's reverse engineer this. If you do this right, if you do this according to our process, you will have 10 to 30% of your email list convert that you built for this particular campaign. 10 to 30%. That means, and they will convert from email subscribers to actual backers of your campaign at, basically a dollar amount typically above the average pledge value. So, your average pledge value is like your small pledge, your medium pledge, and your big pledge all like work together. And, maybe the average pledge is $70. Well, your backers from your email list, if you build them the way that we advise, you're going to get, $85 a backer or whatever. It's very common. Just throwing out numbers there. So 10 to 30%, if you do this right, will convert to backers. And if it doesn't happen, it means you did something wrong. Now, and there's so much in there. I mean, we did an entire email marketing course on how to warm people up to get them excited so that they become that, very commonly 15, 20% of people will back a campaign that you, that conversion rate from email subscriber to backer. But the first thing that we do, we are all about $2.50 per email subscriber. That's what we aim for. I want to say LaunchBoom says $4 per email subscriber. That's what I've heard at least. There are others that have different numbers, but we think $2.50. If it's $2.50, we're going to be able to build a lot of emails, and that's our goal. And if it's not $2.50, there are problems potentially in the landing page and how convincing that is that your product is interesting and awesome, how well it demonstrates that your product is interesting and awesome, or maybe the ad and the audience that you're targeting, maybe they're not great or whatever. But $2.50 is our benchmark for email subscribers, and there are some variants on that. But like for example, Deliverance, it's like $3.50 is fine because I've got a huge, very expensive product that I'm fine with. And so anyway, hopefully those are some like cost per email subscriber and then conversion rates, cost per click, all of that. I mean, cost per like CPM, all of that information is totally secondary. Your click-through rate, whatever, all of that just boils down to what's the cost per email subscriber. I need to know that number. And then the other numbers can become relevant later, but it all boils into what's your cost per email subscriber. And then what you do, how you communicate with them, how you kind of warm them up into a rabid fan is what your conversion rate comes from. So,
yeah, we have a calculator that we've done up, which you can get on crowdfundingnerds.com/calculator. What's on the our menu there. So if you do want to play around with some numbers, using some benchmarks that we have, then you can do that. So that's probably the easiest way because there's a lot of variables. So it's like you can't really give a straight answer because you have to know what's the average order of your pledges and what's the current conversion rate of your landing page and what is the current cost per lead and what's your budget. So all those things are variables that impact those numbers. So you kind of need to throw them into a calculator.
Yeah, and maybe this is a good time to mention that's why deluxe editions make so much sense for Kickstarter. First of all, people like deluxe editions and they tend to back them on Kickstarter at a very high rate, whereas like on the regular market, the standard edition is preferred generally because it's cheaper. But the price of, let's say, a $20 product, it just doesn't really work with spending lots of money on Facebook ads. You're not going to be able to get email leads that convert at a profitable rate for a product that's very small, that doesn't cost much. So it makes sense to have pledge levels that increase the average order value. So, the deluxe edition takes the $20 product to a $35 or $40 product. And then but there's the all-in version, which maybe takes the product to a $69 product. And that's how a $20 product can actually make, 10% conversion rate, $2.50 an email. That's $25 for a customer to pledge whatever the average order value is. And if you're asking people to pledge 20, if you're spending $25 to get somebody to pledge 20, it's senseless, right? So you need to bump up that average order value, and you need to be cognizant of like smaller products that don't cost very much tend to be hard to market. You have to really rely on, it's really a different game. It's in and of itself. You need to rely on much more organic traffic and things like that. So anyway, hopefully that's helpful.
Now, one thing you said on the webinar, which I think probably shocked a lot of people, is that you sort of gave this example. If you sent an email to 1 million people and they're not particularly engaged, you're actually better off sending an email to 1,000 people who are engaged, so that you get a higher conversion rate there.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk to a little bit about that? Because I think a lot of people do this. Oh, if only a celebrity was to reshare my project and expose my project to 1 million people, then I would make it. Well, I think in reality, that often isn't the case.
It really is not. And see, the thing is, whenever advice becomes common knowledge, you are late to the party. I remember, in fact, there was Frank Peretti in the 1980s wrote a book called This Present Darkness, which is near and dear to my heart because deliverance is themed in a very similar way. And that book actually wasn't very popular when it was released. It was only when Amy Grant, who was a very famous singer-songwriter at the time, said, "Oh, I read this book and I really loved it." That's when it became popular. That's when it started selling millions of copies and it exploded. If back in the day, if Oprah said your product was amazing and raved about it, you would get sales. Like nowadays, you'll have, like, I still remember the Kanye West 2024 Super Bowl commercial that he filmed on his iPhone, complained about the price of the Super Bowl, and he sold like 30, 40 or $40 million worth of stuff because he spent $7 million on that ad recorded with a cell phone. And other things, but
which is
there are ways.
Probably the most ingenious ad.
Yeah.
Like people will be studying this in universities, I think, in the future. This
so funny. Yeah.
This mobile ad that created so much profit.
So when you develop your own email list full of raving fans that, 1,000 emails, that actually seems pretty daunting to a lot of people. They think I can only do this by spending money on ads, marketing. That a lot of people will come to us and it's totally fine. Like if they don't have an email list and they need 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000 email subscribers is their goal, that's fine. But you're going to really help yourself if you do like organic stuff. But even 1,000, like a lot of people overestimate the amount of emails they need in order to fund on day one. And they think that's why they think, oh, if I get 1 million from some website, then I'm gonna, that's gonna help me. It's gonna push me over the edge, because they look at this task of gaining 1,000 emails on their own as like insurmountably difficult and not very valuable anyway. And so I actually challenged that notion by saying, so I gave a real example. I'm like 1,000 emails for me. So I earned, so I'll actually give a very tangible number. I'll attach a tangible number. For my very first campaign, my first 1,000 emails that I earned were worth $30,000. It was actually about $28,000 is what my first 1,000 emails were worth. $28,000. And then that was, I earned 2,200. We earned $59,000 from 2,200 emails that I earned completely organically. And, the rest is kind of history, which funded us immediately. I had I want to say a $39,000 funding goal. And so and then contrast that with the latest deliverance campaign we ran in September. I had about, I want to say 6,000 and change emails that I send an email blast out, and it did well. We raised 170,000 on day one, 505,000 by the very end. But in the middle of the campaign, I had an email blast from an organization that was related that had 1.24 million email subscribers. And I got to send an email to that organization that was entirely my stuff. Like there was not even, it wasn't like I wasn't an advertisement that was a footnote in their normal email that they send. I was their solid, like I was the star of that email. And there was like a little note that said, this is from us, our sponsor. Please, please, read it and don't unsubscribe from us because we're sending you this advertisement or whatever. Yeah, whatever version they say. And it had an 88% open rate. My email was like on fire, and I earned $17,000 from that. So 1.24 million people, 88% of them opened the email, and I made roughly, closer to $18,000. I outperformed that 1.24 million people with 1,000. In fact, I earned like 50% higher or 60% higher than that email list of 1.24 million. And this is what I found is that any influencer, anybody that sends for you, that you did not build an email list, but you're just kind of taking advantage of somebody else's, or an influencer that has a million, or what I joked about, like if Cardi B wants to tweet about my Kickstarter campaign, I'm totally fine with that, and her 7 million fans on Twitter or something. But even if that happens, it's not going to explode you into a viral sensation. It's much more likely that you're going to get less than 0.1% of those people to
We have to
convert.
figure out how to get you on the Joe Rogan podcast. You could both talk about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or something.
Yeah, well, I'm a first degree black belt, and and I live like 30 minutes from him, so I'm sure that will people say I look like him. My mother, my mother, just like side note, my mother-in-law sent me a video of a politician. She was like, "You look just like this guy," and it was Conor McGregor. It's like, Mia, that's not a politician. I guess he may be. I don't know, but that was funny. So I evidently look like every guy that like shaves his head and has knotted up ears. So yeah, but yeah, I'd be down if Joe Rogan found me interesting to talk
Joe
to.
Rogan, if you're listening to this.
So
cool. Well,
yeah.
we probably should wrap up here. Maybe we just, the final question they have here is to do with features and tools of Kickstarter. In your opinion, what has been the best changes that Kickstarter has recently introduced that you have seen really move the needle for campaigns?
Man, well, the first thing is, I'll say that Kickstarter has dominantly strongest. The reason that you generally would probably want to use Kickstarter if you were a first-time creator is that their organic traffic is very highly significant. Like there's nobody that outmatches. So even before, when they just were lagging behind and GameFound was innovating so incredibly, over Kickstarter, the organic traffic just, yeah, that's why they're like the number one, platform, is because they have a lot of people that visit. And I got some behind the scenes numbers. I don't want to talk too much about it, but I can say that the number is significantly higher than you might expect. The disparity between Kickstarter and all the other platforms. Now that said, there is a lot of traffic that you can bring in. Like dominantly, you're going to get backers through your email list and whatnot. And that's the way you're going to get funded. Kickstarter is not like a fire starter; it's a fire accelerant. And so, but that said, like the features and tools that Kickstarter in particular has come up with, feels like they're copying GameFound. Like a lot of things that they're doing are like, wow, GameFound's doing really great with this. They're kicking our butts. We need to do like a stretch pay feature.
Like the space race, someone
Yeah.
puts on into space, and we have to do that. And then it's like, well, we're going to put 2 people into space.
That's right.
That's basically how it's going.
Yeah, and which is, I think it's a good thing for creators, but I do think that too much fragmentation is not a good thing. But at the moment, it doesn't. It's I don't know. Kickstarter is now that they are moving and trying to catch up. It seems like everybody's working really hard there to catch up. But I'll say the late pledge system it made me $20,000 more by pressing a button, by just enabling my products to be purchased after the campaign ended, like immediately after, but not in a pledge manager, just in like a late pledge system. That is huge. They're going to release a pledge manager, and I personally, I love Hive. Like, anybody who listens to this long enough knows that, like, I'm a fanboy of the Hive pledge manager. And but their pledge manager could be a real game changer for a lot of people. And I think that, like, normies that don't listen to this podcast and have no idea about a pledge manager or how valuable it is. If you do, by the way, if you're a normie right now and you're listening to this podcast and you're like, what's a pledge manager? Then I'm going to tell you, it's something that you need to research right now, because holy cow, it will add, for me, I've already upsold over $100,000 on a pledge manager of my campaign was 505,000. I've made like $180,000 more in my pledge manager. About 80,000 of that is shipping, that we're charging for various things. But 100,000 is people like either backing, like I have 1 to 3 people every day that back, or that pre-order deliverance off of our pledge manager. And then in addition to that, we've got 20% of the people or more, I don't know the exact number, but all of this adds to over $100,000 that we've earned by upselling. And if you want not to have an extra $100,000, don't use a pledge manager. If you want to be an idiot, don't use a pledge manager. Okay. But if you don't want to be an idiot, then you find out what the idiot does and you don't do that thing. And the idiot doesn't use a pledge manager. So anyway, and I know there are like fringe cases where people might not want to use a pledge manager. One of our clients, our amazing clients, Gabe Barrett of Best with One Games, he does not use pledge managers because he delivers right away. It's like, okay, the campaign ends, the product's in the mail like a month later, and the next Kickstarter campaign or GameFound campaign, is launching. A couple of weeks from the finish of the first one. Like, there are always, I speak in hyperbole when I say this, but generally, if you didn't know what a pledge manager was, you need to inform yourself. They're amazing. Go listen to one of our Hive pledge manager episodes or whatever. But the last thing I'll say is pledge over time is a big deal. Like, I wish I had that for my campaign. Getting people, the average pledge of my campaign was $148 per pledge. And this wasn't like big money or anything. This was like people going all in and, for 260 or whatever. And, other people going all, just gameplay content. And that's like 150. So it's like, it was a big campaign, and holy cow, pledge over time would have been so nice. That stretch pay feature is, in my opinion, GameFound's number one thing that they have over Kickstarter. But Kickstarter just is implementing one that's like pay in 4 equal payments, which I think is really, really smart to have something like that. And GameFound was incredible innovating like that. And so Kickstarter just kind of being a copycat is, it's not a bad thing. I mean, that was a great thing to copy, for their creators. And then lastly, I think probably the most impactful thing that everybody already kind of understands about Kickstarter is their email notification and their app notifications. The ones that are like, this project just launched that you've been following. Like, you want followers so that you get the Kickstarter launch notification delivered to them. And then also the final 48 hours. And then I believe they have like a final 48 hours and then an 8-hour notification as well. That's like, back this now or never, kind of thing. And it really makes a very noticeable difference on the number of pledges. GameFound has the same, and it makes a very noticeable difference in pledges there too. So one thing I really would like to see, though, that GameFound does that Kickstarter does not, is like, I want to see how many people backed my game or upgraded their pledges, or what the dollar change was as a result of my update. GameFound does that, and I think that's really incredible. And Kickstarter doesn't. But I noticed, actually, like the last update that I made, if I look at Hive Pledge Manager, it's like 1 to 3 sales a day. And I ended up getting something like 17 sales the day that I released my Kickstarter update. And, it was obviously had a dramatic improvement, but that'd be nice,
One thing I like to see on GameFound, which Kickstarter does, is that Kickstarter on the community tab allows you to see which countries people are backing from. You probably can see this on the back end and GameFound if you are the project, but publicly facing, you can't see that, and that's very useful information for marketers if you want to sort of think about ad spend budgets in the future. It's good to look at a similar project, see, okay, where's the majority of their backers coming from? Well, I can then allocate the appropriate ad spend on those countries. So I wish that was something that we could see on GameFound, but that's not a big change. I'm sure they would introduce that at some stage.
Yeah. So overall, like I think that the GameFound versus Kickstarter, there's an argument to be made for both platforms. I still believe that. It seems to me that GameFound is the innovator and Kickstarter is the laggard that's like trying to catch up. But they now have a good team. I really like Asher, the head of games. I think he has not just like it's funny because have you ever seen the Hunger Games?
Mm-hmm.
The head of games at the Hunger Games is like a very it's like not there's not a long life expectancy for the head of games, and the last head of games right before Asher was around for like 4 months and gone. It's like I don't even know their name. Actually, I can't remember their name. It just wasn't long enough to register. But Asher has a very customer first, like the creator first mentality. And what I really like about him is that he was a creator first that was complaining about all the same things that we've been complaining about. And he's like, wow, now that I'm here, I know how to liaison with creators and like the product team to help fix this stuff. And so I was really encouraged by that. And
We'll have to have him on the podcast sometime.
yeah, he said he wants to join us as well. And he's like, I have to get everything approved through like the media team and whatnot. So but now that I have a clear in and some new best friends over at Kickstarter, I know like 4 or 5 people now.
Now there's secret handshakes.
Yeah, that's right. The Illuminati handshakes. I am now in. So we'll see what kind of comes from that. So anyway, this was longer than I expected, but hopefully it was great information for those listening. So
Great.
what do we do
I
now?
suppose we'll just let Robot Richard sign us out.
All right, do it, Robot Richard.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week's episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. For more resources, articles, and to listen to past podcasts, please visit us at crowdfundingnerds.com. And if you have a crowdfunding question, we also have a page on our site where you can send a message directly to us. Please visit crowdfundingnerds.com/question. And if your question is a great question, we may include it in a future podcast. Thank you all again for listening to this week's episode, and we'll see you next week. Stay nerdy.